everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'm having a good day. I'm off all this week, which means that I am able to get a jump start on recording a bunch of videos as opposed to waiting until Sunday and then like, oh crap, I gotta make videos. So I am in a great mood. I'm in a fantastic mood. So we're gonna jump right into it. The topic is not of a fantastic mood, but I think it's very important. So no dilly-dallying today because I'm not in a dilly-dallying mood. But we're gonna get started. So, anticipatory grief. What is that? That sounds wild, that sounds crazy, but it is exactly what it sounds like. It's when you anticipate the grieving process of, the severance of anything. And the way I came across this term was through my therapist. My mind just went blank. When it was probably earlier this year or late last year, when we were talking about some concerns I was having about losing a friend potentially to a situation where, you know how relationships sever and people get older, all that nonsense. But I was really, really upset by it to a point where I was already grieving for something that hadn't occurred yet. And she told me, she's like, anticipatory grief is kind of a defense mechanism for a lot of people because it allows you to feel the grief of something before it occurs. So once it does occur, you've prepped yourself enough for it. So we're going to just unpack that and why it's somewhat good, especially if you know something is going to change, and why sometimes it can be really detrimental to relationships you have. So we're going to start off with the first one. Why is it sometimes good to have anticipatory grief? So, for example, if you're in a situation in which you are about to lose a loved one to, a terminal disease or whatever situation, something that is definite, where there's not coming back from this. Anticipatory grief allows you to feel those feelings, as opposed to just letting it, we're not going to feel it, it happens, and then your world collapses. Anticipatory grief allows you to feel those things as they come, perhaps like develop a sort of acceptance before it occurs, and then you can, when it actually happens, okay, I have, trained myself to feel these feelings. I know what it's feeling like, I'm understanding how I'm going to react to this. And then when it happens, of course, it's still going to hurt. Of course, it's going to be maybe a world-shaking event, but you're not necessarily put into a place where these emotions just hit you like a truck, right? It's something you allow to wash over you and to develop, and then you move on. Now, how can that be detrimental to relationships that are not necessarily going to be definitely severed? Like, for a person like me I don't have acute anxiety, but I have enough anxiety where I start to overanalyze things and start to prepare for the worst. And people are like, well, that's because you're a pessimist. I am not a pessimist. I had to stop telling myself that my default mood is bad, because my default mood is not bad. I'm actually a generally pleasant person, like not probably to be around, but in general, I'm a pleasant person, and I had to tell my brain that you need to stop saying that your general default mood is bad, and that went hand in hand with anticipatory grief, because if my default mood was always bad, if it was always upset or disturbed, then of course I'm always anticipating the severance of some type of relationship or anything like that. And the most recent time that it occurred was, oh gosh, I'm trying to find the specific thing, because like I said, that this was one of my highest defense mechanisms, where I was preparing for the worst almost on a daily basis. And it kept me in a rancid mood. It made me, not want to interact with people because it didn't matter, because it was going to end. Like, it's not a good place to be in. So for my specific example, I can't even think of what it was. And I guess it's because it didn't end. And if it comes to me, I'll tell you. But speaking with my therapist more, she told me to combat, we're going to say negative anticipatory grief, and I guess I wouldn't say positive anticipatory grief. What is another word? I can't think of another word, but if it comes up. So negative versus just anticipatory grief. Let's just separate it like that. So the difference, we already outlined the difference. Oh gosh, my mind is going blank, y'all. I ate breakfast before I did this so I could make sure that I was like sharp. Oh god. Okay. to combat anticipatory grief thoughts, especially for someone like me, where it's like an automatic reaction. If I notice something different in a person's demeanor, if I start to feel like I'm being too much for someone, I immediately start the process of grieving, which means, I'm grieving because I know, no, this situation is going to end. And so I start to distance myself. I start to feel bad about like why it came to an end. Like really forming situations in my head in which this thing will end, thus putting myself in situations for it to end. And and I think that's why the situation that I was talking to my therapist initially about didn't end, because I shifted my thought process where I wasn't like subconsciously putting myself in situations in which it could end, because I feel like everyone has done this where we play those scenarios in our head and we're like, oh gosh, this is another way that this can end and blah, 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 blah. And somehow one of those end up being right. And it's because we make it, the thing that is right. We have drastic ones where it's like, and then they could get married tomorrow and then they die on the wedding day. Like, or it could be something as simple as like, I stopped talking to them because I'm scared they're going to stop talking to me. Bam, you finished off the relationship. So my therapist told me, if you start to notice that you're grieving for something that has not occurred, pinpoint it and try to figure out what is causing that specific amount of grief. So it can vary, it could be something as simple as like, they haven't texted me in 2 days, or they're only sending me one word text. And this particular situation was about a friend, not by like a relationship or anything, but you can definitely apply this to your relationships. But this one is about like a platonic friend who is my best friend, is still my best friend. Oh, I'm realizing what it is now. Okay, here we go. I'll give you an explanation. So I was scared that a friend of mine was just pretty much going to stop talking to me. And this has been a fear of mine for years, being his friend, because I felt like I had forced him into being my friend. And that's one of my biggest fears about, I call it, Stockholm syndrome. Obviously you probably know what that is, where it's like you've been kidnapped and then you start to bond with your kidnapper. And I felt like that was our situation, because initially he did try to ghost me and I didn't allow it. And now we're friends. No, we're not quotations. We are friends. That's my best friend. So, we've been apart for a little while because he's got a different career. I've got a different career, and we haven't seen each other in a very long time. And so part of me was like, this is it. He's leaving. Oh gosh, my friend, I'm going to die. And just, I think, one of the biggest traits of negative anticipatory grief is self-pity. Not regular anticipatory grief where it's like you really got something to worry about and you need to prep yourself for it. But negative anticipatory grief, I feel like, involves a lot of self-pity. Woe is me. Oh gosh, this is going to hurt me. And that was something else my therapist pinpointed. She's like, okay, you need to get out of this idea that your world is breaking. Tell me, what is your relationship with this person? And I had nothing but positive things to say. And then she's like, okay, then why do you think this is going to end? And then it was always something like, well, me or this and Diamond and blah. And she's like, girl, this is a friendship. It takes more than one person to be in a friendship. You're not even regarding how he feels. And then, of course I have excuses out the wazoo. So I'm like, but what if he's just too nice and he doesn't want to tell me that he hates me in real life? And she's like, I feel like he would tell you this or he would just stop talking to you. And I'm like, yeah, but it's seriously, like, negative anticipatory grief in most cases is not rational whatsoever. It has no has no standing because it has nothing for you to probably reference it to. So there are some cases where, like I said, regular anticipatory grief, it doesn't have to be as definite as death, but it can be like, you know what? We are on the last ropes of this relationship. We're on the last ropes of this friendship. I feel it coming. I hate that it's ending, but it's going to end, so I need to prep myself for that. That's completely different, and you may have signs that that's what's happening. But in my case, there were no signs. And it actually, after talking to my therapist about it, she was like, if you do start to notice signs, because this doesn't mean that there will be no signs. If you do start to notice signs, how are you going to address them? And part of me was like, avoidance behavior, like 100%. But she's like, no, address it, because you were already in the process of preparing to end this relationship. Why not strive? Why don't put the like more brain power and energy into preserving it as opposed to letting it end? Now, if it needs to end, it'll end. I'm not telling y'all to try to maintain and retain relationships you need to like end. Like, if you've seen my channel, you know what I'm talking about. Like, some relationships just gotta bam, all right, I'm grieving, I'll be grieving for a while. But when it comes to situations like this, if there's nothing wrong with the relationship, if there's just things that have changed, like with my friend, I recently, we spoke about something, and I told him, I'm like, I know that you are seeing someone because your attention span is very, very short. And I don't want that to happen. I still want us to be able to talk. I still want you to talk to me. I still want to talk to you. And I don't want to feel like this is a burden on you. So can you please, like, fix that? And then he actually apologized. He's like, yeah, I'm sorry. I notice when that happens too. I'll work on it. And I'm like, okay, great. And then that's it. But if I was still in anticipatory grief mode, then I would have taken his short responses and, like long spans of time without texting me as him trying to exit the relationship. And then I'm like, okay, well, this is it. Let me prepare to grieve. R.O.P. our friendship. R.I.P. Did I say R.O.P.? Rest on peace. Rob. But I addressed it because I realized that I do want to maintain this relationship and that it is important for me to do so. So I guess to wrap this up, I feel like this is the most cohesive. All right, see, we're messing it up already. Because the statement I was going to say, I feel like this is the most cohesive video I've done in a very long time. And then I couldn't even think of the word cohesive. But I feel like this is one of those videos that I did have a lot of actual foundation to talk about. Because a lot of my videos is pretty much like, something comes up in my head and I'm just going to like talk about it until, 15-minute mark. But this one, I really had some solid thought processes with it. So, meh. Anyway, y'all, if you are facing anticipatory grief and you're not sure if it's a negative one or if it's just a typical one, I say that that's going to take some internalizing and thinking about, how is this actually going to affect? Is this something that is going to happen, or am I going to make it happen? And I think that's the stark difference between anticipatory grief and negative anticipatory grief. So anyway, I hope y'all have a wonderful day, a wonderful week. I will have a new video for you next week for sure, because I'm going to record it right after this video. I'm just going to change my shirt. Yeah. That's showbiz, baby. All right. If you are not on my Patreon listening to my podcast, you should be, because duh. Link in the description below. Like, share, and subscribe, and go ahead and share one of the videos you love of mine, and hopefully more people will see it. I've been getting a lot of subscribers. I've been getting like one a day. So I'm like, yeah, look at me. Anyway,